All right, so now let's look at playing and getting started with a game. So we're going to touch or click on play. And I am using a touch screen. So one of the things you will see if you're on a PC or a Mac is the additional button that says import, which is going to be down here at the bottom right. It does not have that. So there are several ways to get started. One way to get started is to create a world, is to create new, and then click on new. And this will bring up a game settings menu where you can name your world. So I could just call this Nick's World or whatever. And you can change your game mode. There are two game modes, survival and creative. Survival, you actually start with no inventory at all, and you have to mine and then craft items in order to access them. And you can also have a lifespan, which means you have to have health, you have to have rest, you have to have food. You cannot let mobs or other things hurt you. You can't fly, you can't jump off a cliff without dying. And of course, if that happens, you can play again, but you lose all the stuff you gained. And then you have creative mode, which I like to play mostly in and use mostly because it gives you everything and allows you to have this plethora of inventory to do. And you can fly around, you can do all sorts of things, and kind of opens the door to a lot of other areas. You have difficulty levels. You have peaceful, easy, normal, and hard. Peaceful, as far as this is when you play in the survival mode, is kind of how difficult it is for mobs and other things in there. If you play hard, there will be constantly being things after you and actually could damage, provide damage to you. So I just keep it at peaceful. This is the main thing. Some other things you'll see in here is the world preferences, which has a starting map, which basically sets up a map, or it gives you a map to start out so that you can document or show what your world looks like. And so you can actually create maps to show what people are going to be going to. And it will actually show kind of like a bird's eye view of what the world is that you have based on where you traveled. And then a bonus chest just puts an actual chest out there for you in the beginning of the game. So if you want to provide players with specific items, you can put those in the chest. And so it just automatically puts them in. The permission levels, this goes with multiplayer on how they will join. So you can see that. There's lots of different levels there. Basically, you have a visitor level where they can interact, but they can interact with the world or explore the world, but they can't necessarily interact with the blocks, the items, or the entities. And then you have the member status. They can break and create and attack mobs and other players. And then operator status, which is like the full status. The same person who was a host would also have that. Or if you're at a teacher level, you're automatically at operator level. Your students, when they join your world, should be by default a member. If you are using Minecraft with other teachers, mainly by default, they're going to come in as, even if you select member, they're going to come in as an operator. Now, under world types, there are 3 different world types. There's a flat world, which is just as it sounds. A flat world is really only 4 layers. So you got grass layers, you got 2 kind of dirt layers, and then you have a bedrock layer. And then underneath that, if you break through underneath all of those, you're what they call is the void. You're actually under the flat world, and you would just keep on falling. So unless you flew back up through the hole that you made, you would not be on the surface, you would be under it. And there you can't build or really do anything but kind of see the world underneath of it. So it truly is a flat world, but flat worlds go on forever. There's no restrictions. So it's going in each direction, lots of different ways. So that's flat. An infinite world is typically the same thing as a flat world as far as it goes on in every direction, but the topography and the hills and the mountains and all the different things that might be generated in a Minecraft game, because it's generated at random when you choose an infinite world. You don't know what you're going to land on. You don't know what you're going to get. And every time you do it, your world looks different. So that's infinite. And then the last one is an old world. I like to think of an old world as an infinite world in the fact that it has the topography, it has the different mountains, rivers, lakes, things like that are going to be generated in your world, but it's going to have a limit. You can only go so far. So I believe it's if you break out the coordinates, it would be like 256 blocks in kind of every direction. And it's kind of restricted. So it's almost like you have a dome over your world in that way. Most of the time I'm in infinite or flat. I tend to use infinite if I want to have, lots of different things. If I need like a blank canvas to try out stuff and I just need flat area, whether I'm coding or doing something else, I choose a flat area. And then you have some other things that you can control in these game settings. Friendly fire, you can show coordinates. This turns coordinates on, so you actually see where you are in the world. There's an X, Y, and Z coordinate. Other things, as you can imagine, fire would spread. So if you caught something on fire that wood and it was next to trees in a forest, then it would spread to those and burn it down. If you had a house that was made of materials that could, that fire could hurt, then of course that would be damaged too. You can make sure that TNT does not explode or damage anything. You can turn on and off mob loops. Natural regeneration would be, for example, let's say you dug through some grass and then you planted or put some dirt back, grass would grow right over it. Or if you put some blocks directly on grass and then you got rid of those blocks, it would be just dirt because, that's what happens. Grass can't grow, right? So the natural regeneration would make that grass again eventually. Tile drops would just be, can you actually drop things that are in your inventory, as opposed to placing them as putting them down, but dropping is so other people can get them. And other things like immediate respawn would just be if you're playing survival. After you die, of course, you would be spawned back right away without starting. It just would do that. And then there's some even more things. We have cheats. Activating cheats allows you to use the command blocks, or excuse me, not the command blocks. Well, it does do that, but activate the commands, which you can actually type and change things and manipulate them in the game through these cheats. The do daylight cycle, which means it'll do day and night over a certain amount of time. So it's approximately like 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a night. So if you play 20 minutes, you sure should get a whole day. Mob spawning would just be the ability to put in things, spawns or eggs or characters or things that you can put in the game. So if you have that turned on, it means you could actually add a chicken, or you could add a pig or an ocelot or an NPC. But if you have that turned off, you would not be able to add those or spawn those. The other thing I'll just bring up is the weather cycle. That means that you could get storms, you get thunderstorms, you could get rain, or it could be sunny. And so if you turn that on, it'll cycle through that kind of in a random way. Of course, if you're in higher altitudes, instead of rain, you're going to get snow or sleet if you're kind of in the middle. But you can also turn that off so you don't have to worry about those things. Same thing with the do daylight cycle. You can turn that off so it just always stays day. And so you don't have to worry about working at night. So that's the game settings there. So we went in just to try to play a game, and you can see all these game settings and world preferences you can do. But let's say you're ready. You kind of have creative, peaceful. This is typically where I start, and then flat, just to get an idea. And you can go ahead and hit play. And that will start to generate your world. And it'll have the name that you set it up to be. While your world is generating, you will see this screen that comes up. Usually there's little messages that'll say like, try this command or do this, just reminders of things you can do in the game to help you with the understanding some extra tips. Basically, it's like a tip area. All right, it looks like my world has been generated. And there I am. And now I can kind of look around. You can see it's flat everywhere I go. So one of the things I should mention is that once you have your world generated and you decide, oh, I didn't mean to do a flat world, I wanted to do an infinite. You can't hit the pause button here, which brings up your settings. If you're on a PC or Mac, you would just hit escape, but you can't do that and then go back and change it. It'll be grayed out, and that's something you can't really choose to change. You can change your creativity level, you can change your difficulty level, but you can't change whether the world is changed to a flat or from flat to infinite. While we're in this, before we go to any other, I want to explain another setting that you might be interested in, and that is the classroom settings. And so in classroom settings, these are some simple turning on and off, allowing commands. So that allows students to have commands in the world so they can manipulate. Some do it, some don't. It's up to you. Code builder, whether you want them to be able to access the coding, whether you want it to be always day, perfect weather. So again, the classroom settings have some overlap with the game settings, but this just makes it easier for you to narrow some of the things that are more appropriate for setting up your classroom, especially if you're doing multiplayer. Keep inventory. You would only really keep that on is if you were playing survival and somehow they needed to keep the inventory even when they came back. Allowing mobs, allowing destructive items, turning those on and off. If you're worried about players damaging each other, again, just as the survival mode, then you would turn those off. Last couple of things here is you got immutable worlds. That just means the world itself cannot be destroyed as far as like blocks. Everything in the world itself, unless you have specific allow blocks, nothing in the world can be built. So it's almost like a view-only document or a view-only world. So you can run around and do the world. It's like the visitor that I talked about earlier. And then you can add borders to games, and the borders are kind of containers. And so they have these red sparkly things that come up. So if you don't want to see the border effects, you can turn that off. Another cool thing about the classroom settings is this resource link. So this allows you to put anything you want inside of Minecraft in the game. So I could have a URL. Maybe this goes to something like a Flipgrid that I might have, or do this. I should have put an S there. There we go. And maybe you have something else. Maybe it's Google Classroom, maybe it's Teams. Whatever you have, it'll link directly specifically to that resource. So they can go just hit escape out of their game and they'll see that. And now I'll just type in here so you can see. And so that's part of the classroom settings. So now when I go out, there's that resource link right there. And if I touch it, it's going to take me straight to the outside resource. So it's a good way, especially if you have kids answering questions or doing things in a world, they can go instantly to the spot that you want. You can also do that in game, but this is a quick one for a general way. And if you're wondering what this button here is, there's two buttons. One is so you can host games, and then this is your kind of game settings. If I go back, now I'm at the game. You can also see, since I took coordinates on, I'm at my position of 0, 4, 0. So that's really how to get started. And now I'll talk about the user interface and how you can actually do it on a touch screen. If you need to see the video about how to navigate and how to see the inventory and build and destroy, there are separate videos for those for using the keyboard.